No worries.
All right, we're going straight in. Alex, good to see you, man. How are you?
Good to see you both. Very good. Very good.
All right, well, Lauren's
Hey,
got
you?
she's got a question as always to fire at
Hello.
you.
Hey, Lauren.
Is AI good or bad?
Neutral. Haha.
That was going to be faster than expected.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
It's
It's
it's how
actually
I
an
work these
interesting
days.
point in the house at the moment, Alex, because on Kubrio, the self-directed education platform that these guys use for their like homeschooling, alternative education, unschooling. There's an AI club, right? And you've even had,
Mhm.
did you even have a debate about whether AI was good or bad, or is that coming up? Remind
I
me.
can't remember. I've done so many debates.
Okay.
I don't really do debate club anymore because
You want to sit down?
yeah, I'll
Yep.
sit down. Because yeah, it's a specialized class.
Okay. All right. So then I mean, Alex is neutral. He'll go into why in a minute, but what do you think about it? Because I know you've played around and done the clubs and you use it to like make graphics and things or like for writing. What have you done?
There's this one, it's like AI bedroom, and where you put in your bedroom and then you choose a specific like modern or um stuff like that, and then it'll generate a room.
You mean like a style, you mean?
Yeah,
Like a
style,
theme?
that's it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, we did like this QR code and where you could put in you can copy and paste. I don't think that was very AI, but you can copy and paste something that you like and put it into the QR code, and then you can scan it and it'll take you there. Stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Cool. All right. So
Hmm.
playing around, having
Mm.
fun. And what do you think? Good or bad?
I think it's yeah, I think it's a good, it's helpful, but I feel like it can become very bad if wanted to.
All right,
Yeah.
Alex.
So neutral, right?
Yeah, neutral. Yeah, I was gonna say neutral, but you know.
Ta-da! Well done.
Well, let's get your thoughts, mate. How would you explain to Lauren, to a 12-year-old, any other kids that are listening to this, or parents, um, your thoughts around your journey into the realms of AI? Because I know you've been going deep down this rabbit hole and building, and we'll get into
Hmm.
all of that. But it's interesting to
Hmm.
know, what kind of aha moments you've had. You're always a very critical thinker around these topics.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
do your best to explain to a 12-year-old your thoughts on AI.
All right. So I think the most important thing and aha moment for me. So a number of years ago, I read a book called Superintelligence by a guy called Nick Bostrom. And that book was like the whole, the buzz back in the day. It's like, oh yeah, if we uh, going by what the book wanted to, the point that it wanted to present, it was sort of like, once we hit a few milestones, like particularly language was a big one, what was considered an AI complete problem, we would end up with general intelligence and, quickly from general intelligence to super intelligence, right? Something once something can think for itself. And anyway, like, I used to believe that crap when I was, reading it back then. Now that I've matured a little bit, you start to sort of, I guess the older you get, the more you realize that, things aren't so simple. And something like intelligence as a concept is just really, really broad. And I think what a lot of people do when they talk about artificial intelligence, first of all, they conflate intelligence with consciousness, which are two, in my mind, different things. And I don't think we even know what emerges from what and whether they even emerge from each other or whether they're nested in each other or something like that. So you got this sort of uh, misunderstanding first. And then the second understanding is just intelligence itself. We have no idea what that is. Like the best approximations we have for it is like pattern recognition, or, doing a different thing, like adapting to a circumstance, right? That's sort of our best way to define intelligence. But the problem is when it comes to artificial intelligence, the emphasis or the focus is purely on like computational intelligence, which is kind of like one sliver. If you think about like what a human is, a human is a really generally intelligent, I guess, being or thing, right? And we've got like emotional intelligence, we've got like muscular intelligence, hormonal intelligence, like intuition. Like you've got all of these. I don't think we can even number the amount of intelligence that they are. They sort of all like come together, including your cerebral intelligence, your cognitive intelligence, your computational, like all of it. And you have this kind of like entity that can do many, many things, but not sort of like one specific thing, as good as a computer, right? So anyway, where I'm going with this is sort of this idea that people are quick to see something and then kind of project humanness onto it, which is called anthropomorphization, right? It's like turn it into a human. So we see this thing, like particularly these language models, or even the image models, right? You tell it something and it kind of either converses back to you, it gives you an image that is kind of like what you asked for. And we humans are sort of, oh my god, it's alive. It's like we sort of we project life onto it, when in reality all these machines are basically probability machines. There's actually not really much intelligence in there, or if there is anything, it's like a low level computational intelligence. It's so far from like where people get carried away, like everyone's running around yelling about like, oh, Sam Altman's going to create AGI. It's like, no, he's not, bro. Like, and to be honest, the more I dig into this, the more I think AGI is a total scam. Like the fact that we're going to have some general intelligence that is like that outcompetes humans across every dimension, I think is complete crap. And I'll tie this thought off by saying this. It's like at the cutting edge of research, what they're finding is, there's this sort of like agent model now. It's like you take a model and it becomes like a governor for many submodels, and it kind of selects which model to do which task. And then there's specific models that specialize in different tasks. But there's not an infinite number of these micro models that can do micro tasks. So what you need to do is you need to almost batch them, right? So if you picture like a governing model with a bunch of micro models, and another governing model with another bunch of micro models, then that needs to be governed by another model. So even with this sort of computational intelligence, you end up creating these like layers. And what that essentially is like sort of bureaucratic or governing layers in between. So that actually slows the whole system down, increases the amount of energy. So the more general you get, the slower the intelligence gets, the less powerful it is, and the more energy it takes. Like you and me, we eat a banana and we have the capacity to function, like we can jump, talk, think, run, lift, cook. Like we can do all this sort of general stuff. So I think where I'm going with this is like we might find that as human beings, in our path to like create the ultimate artificial general super intelligence, is like we come full circle and just create a human being. It's like, hey, you can actually do that now. Just make babies. So it's like I almost feel it's like the nerds are I don't know, they're gonna punk themselves out of all of this. So anyway, there's my bit of thinking.
All right. Are you clearer now on AI?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just sum this up.
Kind of.
AI is not a living thing, it's just another tool.
Mm.
No different to social media, no different to the computer that we're talking on, no different to the microphone. It's just maybe in some cases a more powerful tool. But as with any tool, the more you become dependent on the tool, the less you are able to do the act yourself. Like, for example, I remember when I was your age and going to school, everyone started using calculators back then. And I was one of the kind of like almost old school. I refused to use a calculator, and I could do my times tables, like all the numbers in my head, all the way through to year 12. Like I remember doing my year 12 exams, and I walked in without a calculator. People were like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, I mean, I can do numbers. And like, no, like people could not function without a calculator. Like that was it. So great tool, but you become a slave of it, or it remains your slave. So same thing with AI is people, like I see them using Chat GPT and all these other things to like help them write or come up with ideas and stuff like that. What they're actually doing is they're losing the muscle to come up with ideas and write and do that sort of stuff themselves. So that's where the danger lies. Like, yes, it can be useful, but it also can be non-useful. But it is not a living thing. It's not a living being. It's not going to, grow sentience out of the circuits and come and kill us all. Like all of that is like a red herring. It's just another tool. So that's my summation. Does that help?
All right, cool. Well, you can rest easy now that AI is not going to rise out of the laptop.
Woo.
Yeah.
You want to say goodbye?
Yes, thank you. Bye.
See you, Lauren. Bye-bye.
All right, mate. So if we back up, let's get everybody up to speed into the reason why you've been on this journey. What piqued your interest? Why did you enter the rabbit hole? And and what's become of all of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, being a dude who likes to write and talk and, language and all this sort of stuff, right? It definitely sparked my interest. I guess, Chat GPT was the first time we've been able to converse with a machine, and it converses back with you, and you're like, holy shit, there's something here, right? And yeah, it captivated me. And I think the seeds from that book, Super Intelligence, I think, I was always interested in AI and stuff like that. And I was the perfect Ethereum archetype like 10 years ago, dude. I was a total, I remember I told you, soy boy, pussy boy, all that sort of stuff, right? So, I was that archetype maybe longer than 10 years ago, but like I was reading all the AI books and how like computers are going to take over the world and all this sort of stuff. And I believed all that crap. Like, I would have been a total Vitalik follower. But, I learned from life, and I pushed myself, and I kind of dropped the Peter Pan, ideals, and like, the Yuval Harari brain in a vat ideas and stuff like that, and started like understanding that, life is not just a program, right? It's not just like this is, again, it's the nerds and the communists. They're all very similar in their mind, because they suck at understanding human psychology. They suck at understanding, humanity. They suck at understanding life. So they think everything is some sort of program, or, like, if only we just gave everybody food and everybody the same amount of money, I mean, things should be fine, right? Like, there's your communists, right? Like the nerds, like, if everybody, like, if we just remove testosterone from all the men, the world would be peaceful. We'd have no more war. It's like they're just so dumb, right? Like they don't understand that life is like really complex. So anyway, I think you get humbled by that over time. So yeah, I was very influenced back in the day by Nick Bostrom's book, and I always thought AI was like a real threat, right? Like there's something there, and that sort of triggered me on this path at like end of last year. And that combined with my linguistic sort of interest took me down the rabbit hole, and then I started questioning. And then I guess this is where the journey of Bitcoin over the last 5 years, Jesus, it's been more than 5 years now. What am I saying? 7 years. It sort of teaches you a lot, right? Like you learn the different principles about life, how things function. Like things aren't so simple. It's not as easy as doing a hard fork and like everything's happy days. Like things are, life and reality is way more complex. And I started questioning these narratives. Like all the nerds were like, oh my God, the rate at OpenAI is moving. Like we'll have AGI in 3 months. Like, the computers are going to take over the world, blah, blah. I was like, man, I should go back and listen to that Nick Bostrom book. I listened to it. I was like, what is this fucking garbage, man? Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. Like, how did I take this seriously before? Like, just nonsense, right? And I listened to a podcast, those two dweebs, the Ethereum guys, the names David Hoffman and that other guy, Ryan Adams or whatever. They do the Bankless podcast.
Oh,
it's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they always like end up self-owning themselves, like morons.
Yeah.
So they had that guy Eliezer Yudkowsky on there or something talking about AI, and like this guy's just one of those classic, like, that like Wojak meme of like the dude that's like fat and balding and like got like a couple of hairs coming out here, that's like yelling on Reddit. Like he's that guy, right? And he's sitting there like on the whole podcast talking about how like the end of the world is around the corner. None of these big AI companies know what they're doing, and without someone like me helping them and making sure that AI stays safe, it's all over. We're going to be dead in 6 months, 12 months maximum. Like the podcast was about 6 months ago. I don't see any of us dying yet. This is like ChatGPT is still just a glorified autocomplete. Like it's just, these people are out of their minds. So that kind of stuff started triggering me, obviously in the wrong way. So I was like, man, there's something wrong here with these narratives. So I started going down the consciousness and computational theory of mind sort of rabbit holes, just trying to understand this. And what I found is like, there's no like consensus around what the hell intelligence is, what's consciousness, what the hell the mind is, what component is the brain, like what fuck the body has to do with everything else, like what is embodied consciousness, cognition, like there's so much out there. It's just a bunch of philosophers arguing with each other about shit. I'm like, man, we have no fucking clue what intelligence is, and here we are babbling on about AGI is going to sprout out of the fucking circuits tomorrow. So the more I went down that, I was like, man, this is just all like hype, stupidity. It's just blockchain 3.0, crypto 5.0. And lo and behold, it's the same idiots that it's attracting, right? So anyway, this was sort of happening alongside me trying to actually build a model of Jordan Peterson, because I thought that was possible somehow. Turned out it's not really that possible, or at least it's not believable. And anyway, I guess without going on too much of a tangent here, we sort of stumbled on maybe a problem that this kind of technology could be used to help solve. And that's what the Spirit of Satoshi project is, which I'll talk about in a minute. But anyway, the long and short of it is that a lot of this stuff is just fear mongering. It is like it's like climate change, right? Like, AGI is gonna kill us all. So you need to empower a new organization to regulate AI. And, when you look into what they talk about when they're regulating AI, they're talking about regulating the kind of speech that is considered safe coming through and being used on these language models, right? So once again, it's another, midwit creating like Overton window about what can be said. Like, because there is one thing that these language models are going to be used for is people are no longer going to be using Google to search for shit. They'll just ask a language model. It's like, hey, how do I do this? What's this? What's that? Blah, 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 right? And like their understanding of the world is going to come through that in the same way as people's understanding of the world at the moment is like the top 3 results from Google, right? Like anything you want to know, that's what it is. So the language model kind of like replace that or like, be the new interface with which you interact with the world. And the danger is that if, these regulators upstream decide what is considered like truth, right? That's, the potential danger. So to combat that, you need alternatives. So anyway, I'll shut up there for a minute, but yeah.
Well, that's one thing. That's one thing I kind of realized when I started playing around with Chat GPT for the first time. I mean, Midjourney and like you say, that's all fun, right? You can make the most amazing graphics. I mean, Sailor sits down, does one every morning and puts it out there, and he gets a lot of likes and retweets and whatever else. And it's crazy the kind of some of the images that come back to you, like, wow, that to me was really impressive. Then when I started playing around with Chat GPT and just asking basic questions, and seeing the wokeism in the answers, like immediately, you're like, this is just, I could have Googled all of this. Like, and it seemed to me as though this is just like sitting in front of Google and then taking from Google whatever it wants and then putting it. It's like Googling for me, it
in a sense. A good way to think about it is these models are like mirrors of the data and the bias they're trained on, right? So it's just a mirror. And what happens in these mirrors, and this is this is like one of the self-owns by these Eliezer Yudkowsky people and the super intelligent Nick Bostrom's and all these nerds, right? Is, they thought, they were so convinced that language was something that only humans could do. And once a machine figured out language, it would be generally intelligent and it would very quickly become super intelligent and would take over the world. Like they were fucking convinced. They call it what's called an AI complete problem, right? And it's not the only thing we actually found out with these language models is that much of language is just patterns. And it's just one of the many things we can do. Like, what they proved really was that human general intelligence is so much fucking broader than just language, right? So what these models do is they are a representation of the relationship between words and letters and phrases and language. Like they are sophisticated autocomplete that takes patterns of language and reproduces it in a way that we as human beings could interpret as making sense. right? So the models don't actually know anything. This is a big misconception in like, and this is why people are saying, oh, you know, the model's lying, it's hallucinating. Well, it's like, well, the model's not fucking lying or not lying. The model doesn't know anything. The model is just stringing words together in a form, in a sentence that makes probabilistic sense based on the patterns that have been embedded into it. That's literally, so it doesn't know the difference between truth or falsehood. Like that concept doesn't exist in a language model. And this drives me crazy when people say that. Like both libertarians, left, right, all the people, like they just have no idea. They're like, oh, you know, this model's evil, it's lying. It's like, you know, Chat GPT, like, sorry, Sam Altman taught it to lie. Like, well, he actually didn't. It's just like, it's just stringing things together. Like, sorry, the autocomplete wasn't accurate, you know, but because it generally is quite accurate, because of the law of large numbers, people think that it actually knows something. It doesn't actually know anything. So that's like sort of myth number one. But to your point though, is if you take mainstream data, mainstream consensus, like, you know, stuff that is in the middle of the bell curve, right? Whatever is accessible in the Overton window, the model's just going to reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can also, you know, build tools around the model to guardrail it, right? So if specific words or specific, you know, phraseology comes up, like, you know, I want to kill it at work today, right? What should I do? You know, the model, like, ding, 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 the word kill was used. I can't tell you how to do that, right? Like, so they've put guardrails in there based on what they consider safe and, you know, useful and helpful and harmless and whatever other fucking terminology they're using these days. Responsible. I hate that word these days. Like, I mean, I love the word responsible, but when they use it, it just drives me crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about, responsible? So anyway, this yeah, you get these sort of, you know, models that are guardrailed, and basically just, it's almost like the ultimate NPC, right? It has no agency. Like,
Right.
it's like a Roomba, you know, it's just like towing the party line, right? Like Orwell could have only dreamed of this sort of
It's
thing.
like the wizard in the corner of the room that knows everything, right?
Exactly. So
But
anyway, that's what these are.
it only knows on what it can draw on. So like one thing that crossed my mind is that, okay, yes, there is a shit ton of information on the internet, but not all of the information that could be available. There are so many books that have never been uploaded, so you're never ever going to get a, you know, a truly intelligent, in air quotes, response to anything that you're asking it. You're going to get,
Yeah,
and that's why I found it so woke, because it's going to draw on,
Wikipedia.
yeah,
It's
what
literally
Wokipedia, as I call it.
yeah, Wokipedia. I mean, that's the primary resource that a lot of these mainstream models are trained on. Like,
Right.
people don't realize, but that's what it is. And, you know, there's actually a big, this is another myth. Like, you know, when people say, oh, ChatGPT was trained on the whole internet. No, it was trained on 0.1% of the data on the internet. It's impossible to train it on all the data on the internet, because all of the data on the internet is not structured in a way that is that is useful for training a model. Like, we found that now with all the Bitcoin stuff that we're doing. Like, we scraped all of the Bitcoin podcasts, like everything you've ever said, everything Sailor, all this sort of stuff. 90% of the data is junk. Can't fucking use it. So it's like, you know, so it doesn't matter like how much data is out there. It's like how much useful data is out there, and that's usually you know, multiple orders of magnitude smaller than the actual total amount of data. So yeah, so like when you look at what sort of structured, formatted data there is out there for training models, whether it's closed source or open source, most of it is like Wikipedia-esque, right? So it's that same stuff. Like, so that's why you like go and ask ChatGPT now, what is Bitcoin? It'll, like, hands down, it'll tell you it is a cryptocurrency based on blockchain technology, yada, 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 yada. I don't even know what that means. Like, what is blockchain technology, first of all? Like, you know, like, what does any of this mean? It's just, but it's like been parroted so many times in the mainstream that what does the model do? It's just like, that's the highest probability for that sentence, right? Like, if you search Google now, that's probably what's going to come up. So the highest probability of that sentence coming out is like that response. So that's what ChatGPT will tell you. And this is precisely what we're trying to do with Spirit of Satoshi. We're going in there and we're doing a training so that the probability clusters in the model are different. So that if you ask it what is Bitcoin, it should say the probability of it saying something like Bitcoin is you know, a new form of sound money that uses economic and social energetic consensus model to deliver a unit and a network that is immutable, blah, blah. It should say something like that, as opposed to cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, blah, 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 which we all know is crap. So that's like it's like a big difference with what we're trying to do with our model. And that doesn't mean that our model is going to know more about Bitcoin. It's probabilistically going to be trained to respond more like a Bitcoiner. And it's a slight distinction. It's super, super, super important.
So it's interesting you say about the data there. I didn't realize that. So even if you've scraped transcripts and whatever else from podcasts or YouTube videos, wherever, you're saying a lot of that is not usable?
Noise. It's noise. It's noise.
Right. And is that because, like, when you have a conversation like this and it's all just written down, it doesn't come across? What's the kind of blocking point?
Oh, it's just noise. Half this conversation's noise. Like, so what's the end to which you're trying to train the model, right? Like, you need to, so like, for example, when, there's like the instruct version of Chat GPT. The instruct version is trained on specifically question and answer pairs, right? So that way, when you use the instruct GPT later, you ask it a question, it gives you a response, right? So it needs to be trained that way to do that. Now, this conversation might have a couple questions and answers filtered in, but it's more of a conversation. So like it's completely useless, or at least 90% useless, maybe even 95% useless for that purpose. So you need to find like sort of what's the aim, and then like trying to take all that data, like imagine the quantum of like words that have come out of like all the podcasts, right? Like, what are you going to do? How do you sift through that and say, okay, this is for question answers, this is for conversation, this is for narrative? Like, it's impossible to do. So like that's why there will always be 1,000 or 10,000x more data out there, maybe even 1,000,000x more data out there than what is actually usable to train these models with.
Wow.
So that's a big thing that people need to understand.
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. So then how did you guys go about solving that problem once you realized, we've got way too much stuff here? I mean, like tens and thousands of hours of podcasts. You've done 100 shows yourself, right? So like how much gets, how many spoken words in an hour and a half conversation is ridiculously big.
Yeah.
So then how do you start deciding on which, actually, let's back up. Spirit of Satoshi. So people, right, let's start there, and then we'll talk about how you built it. What is it, and what was the driving kind of passion behind it?
Yeah. So when I was talking before, as I was going down this rabbit hole of trying to understand what all this AI stuff is, I quickly came to the conclusion that most of it is hype. And as we were building that Jordan Peterson model, I realized what I was building was just something that was floating on the hype. Like there was no use case, right? Like you get this model that talks like Jordan Peterson, but it doesn't really share his model of the world. What are you going to do? Ask it what you ate for breakfast? Like it's a useless app, right? Like the idea was like to have mentors in your pocket.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, sounds like a fun project, but
sounds like a fun project, but it's like doesn't actually solve a problem. So what it was like, I realized I was like building a solution in search of a problem, right?
Right. Which
is basically shitcoinery. Like, it's like, we have this solution. Like, what problem does it solve? Doesn't matter. It's a solution, right? So that's kind of what this is. Like, and that's the funny thing. Like, even your reaction to it, like, was my reaction to it. I'm like, this is fucking cool. Like, we'll have Jordan Peterson, Marcus Aurelius, like Satoshi, like all these greats, like, and you can talk to them. Like, it turns out that there's nothing to talk to them about. Like, like having a conversation with the real Jordan Peterson might be cool, but like, this is not. So along that path, what we stumbled on was like a real problem, which is there is like genuinely, particularly every time a bull run comes along, and the next 1,000,000, 10 million, 100 million people ask the question of what is Bitcoin? How the fuck do I use it? Why is it different to Ethereum? Why should I buy it? Where can I buy it? How do I store it? Like, and what is money? What is energy money? I've heard of this thing. Like, there's 1,000,001 questions down the rabbit hole. Like, and what do we do as Bitcoin content creators? We just repeat ourselves over and over and over again. 10 million podcasts later, we're saying basically the same thing using different words. So like what that told me was, I was like, okay, what are these language models doing? They're taking a model of the world and like a corpus of like content or ideas, and they're reflecting that. And they're saying the same thing using different words. I was like, damn, like could a Bitcoin language model help us do this sort of like question answering process at scale? Because like that's, I think the next 10 years we're going to be in a propaganda war, right? Like there is going to be so much information and data being generated by all these mainstream language models that it's going to drown out, or we're going to have a hard time trying to speak up amongst the noise, like, and create some signal. So the premise of the idea was like, could we do a Bitcoin language model, or it's a bit broader. It's a Bitcoin Austrian economics libertarian language model. So like we partnered with the Mises Institute. They gave us a data dump of everything on their thing. Like, and there's like a fucking lot of information there. I'm talking like every book, every article, everything. So we're doing some data science magic to kind of sift through that and pick out what's relevant. But the model is going to have like a basis in like Austrian economics and libertarianism, and then a layer of like Bitcoin stuff. And yeah, the idea is that you'll be able to ask it anything to do with like Bitcoin or economics, or sort of like our mode of thinking. And the gamble is that it should perform better than Chat GPT or any other model in the world in that domain. And in domains outside of that, it should answer kind of like a Bitcoiner. So if you asked it about climate change, it should tell you drink too much soy or something like that. I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's what it's going to say, but we'll see.
So, have you got all of Satoshi's writings on there as well? Is that another resource? Like Phil Champagne's book is a brilliant example.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, okay. We got that, but it's not like that's necessarily useful. Like it's partly useful, but it forms like such a small fraction of the data set. Like it's just another thing. There's this sort of misconception that, oh yeah, you can train it on Satoshi's tone and stuff like that. And you can do a little bit of fine tuning to make it speak more like, maybe adopt a more Satoshi-esque tone. But the Satoshi-esque tone, you won't tell it to, you need to speak like Satoshi. Like what we need to do is define Satoshi's tone, which was a little bit, his tone was objective. His tone was, kind of like, not formal, not informal. He was kind of like, but if you think of a spectrum, he was a little bit more on the formal side, in the way he spoke. So you'd need to kind of like create a definition of his language style, and then you would need to do some fine tuning specifically on the model to get it to speak like that. Now, that doesn't mean it speaks like Satoshi. It would speak like somebody who is, slightly on the more formal side, a little bit more objective, blah, blah. And people could project Satoshi onto that, sure. But, it's that's a different process than just saying, oh, here's Satoshi's work and now speak like Satoshi. That doesn't work like that.
Right. So the idea being anybody can sit down now with this like software Spirit of Satoshi, ask it a question, any question about Bitcoin, and you're hoping to be able to deliver a well-rounded, factual response rather than some woke MSM kind of nonsense fuddy response. Okay, excellent. Sure. So then back to the original question, when you realized, holy shit, we've got all of this content and a lot of this is just unusable. How then do you, because I guess some people would point the finger and say, well, you're a centralized body choosing which articles, which books, get to make the cut. How did you guys think about that? And what did you just go through a whole list of questions yourself to try and like figure out how would we, which topics, which areas, like what was the whole thought process behind that?
Dan, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
I lost you.
Yep. Oh, you lost me? Okay. Oh, you're frozen now. Okay. Well, I can still hear you, so go for it. No, looks like we have dropped out. Got you back.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
got you back.
I lost you somewhere. I lost you pretty early on, so you have to repeat the whole thing.
Okay. So if I go back to the original question where you come to the realization that, the podcast content was not going to be at all usable, you had a decision to make then of to which articles, books, whatever to put on. And as I might have already cut out at this point, but some people might say, well, then there's a centralized authority here choosing which articles and books and whatever.
Aleks is the new Sam Altman.
Yeah. So how did you go around thinking about that? Like obviously approaching Mises is huge. Like what an amazing win, because you've got such a broad spectrum of Austrian economics and everything on there.
So it's really simple, actually. This again comes from trust me, people have already yelled at me about like, oh, you're no different to Sam Altman. How dare you be the harbinger of be the gatekeeper of what's allowed in the model or not. I'm like, you can build a model too if you want, bro. Like, power to you. Like, I'm doing what I think is right. Here was our selection process. Like, I made sure that the people I hired on the team are all Bitcoiners with like a history in Bitcoin that I trust. Like, so like kind of what I would call remnant grade. So like people that I know have been around, they're not shitcoiners, all that sort of stuff. So that was the first thing. And then we just went with like the main stuff, right? Breedlove, Safedines, your books, stuff that I've written. We included Nick Carter for people, who are angry at him because his work, like particularly like his older Bitcoin work, is fantastic. Everything that KONSENSUS has printed, like all the Bitcoin magazine stuff, like all of this stuff. And here's the thing that people need to understand, is that the data we're selecting and curating, once again, the model doesn't know shit. Doesn't know that it's mine or Breedlove's or yours or anything like that. What we are teaching it is patterns. And in all of this sort of Bitcoin stuff that we've selected, there is patterns that will result in the model being more likely to say, if you ask it what's the second best crypto asset, like it's Bitcoin, not shitcoin, right? Like, so it's more likely to say something like that. That's all we're teaching. It doesn't know any of this data. It's just pattern over pattern over pattern. And all of the Bitcoin sort of stuff that we're selecting, there's kind of like a thematic writing, right? Like when you're writing about Bitcoin, you're generally writing, in that sort of theme. And this selection process, I guess it's an implicit promise that me, Jason, Alan, Jeff, like who were involved in like putting together the initial corpus of Bitcoin stuff, we've just been around long enough to kind of know who's a scammer, who's not, which what do you call it? Mediums you'll get like good Bitcoin content from, right? So that was sort of like the first step. Once we sort of had enough of like gathering all of the crap and we're like, fuck this shit, we need some help from the community. What we did was we created what's called the Nakamoto repository. And in there, it's like people can go to it now. Like if they go spiritofsatoshi.ai, they'll see contribute or sort of add content. The Nakamoto repository is like it's a public-facing repository where anybody can submit whatever the hell they want to this training corpus for Satoshi. And what we just do on a daily basis is I've got one of the guys on the team who's like been around Bitcoin 6-7 years, and he just goes through and he just approves or denies it, right? And believe me, we get people submitting like podcasts with Ethereum founder Vitalik and fucking Richard Hart or whatever. Like we get a lot of junk in there, and we just like delete, and we just select what we think is most Bitcoin-esque or most true to what we're trying to do. And does that mean there's going to be a bias in this model? Abso-fucking-lutely. Yes, there is a bias. And what's that bias going to be? It's going to be a Bitcoin-esque bias, informed or inspired or like influenced by a bunch of Bitcoiners and what our sort of general model of the world is. Does that mean it's going to reflect Svetsky's thinking? No, it's impossible to reflect Svetsky's thinking. Does that mean it's going to reflect Jason's thinking? No, it's impossible to reflect an individual's thinking. It's going to take a theme from all of the stuff that we're submitting. So that's sort of like the second piece. And then the piece about Mises, we're actually going through this now. We're actually figuring out what to use for Mises. And honestly, there's no real science about it. We just said, all right, basically anything that's on the fucking Mises Institute, we're just going to put in there. Like no real selection criteria. But we have to prioritize some stuff. So the way we're prioritizing it is we just like listed out what are the top 20 names, Rothbard, Mises, Hazlitt, this and that. And we said like anything that's tagged with one of those authors, we'll just put that to the top of the list and the rest of it can come up. So it's like, it's not, there's none of this like, once again, Sam Altman doesn't directly influence Chat GPT. It's just the consensus of the mainstream or the theme of the mainstream, content that's out there that influences Chat GPT more than anything else. Where he can influence it is the filters he puts on it. Now, we're not putting any filters on our thing. So like, I'm kind of curious to see, if it tells people to go fuck themselves or whatever, like that'll all sort of depend on what's inside, all the Bitcoin content. But we're not running it through anything, toxicity filters later. We're not running it through any harmlessness filters. Like we're not running it through all of that stuff, which all of the other mainstream models go through so that they don't get sued or something happens, right? So basically you're going to get a bias that is more representative of, the more Bitcoin, not shitcoin thing, plus Austrian economics, libertarianism thinking with no filter from us. That's essentially what you'll get. And that's not Svetsky's model. That's just like the closest we as a group could get to a Bitcoin-like model. There's some other things which I'll go through next, but that's sort of like a basis for answering that question.
Cool. And
does that make sense?
As well, right? For anybody listening that, who you're building this for, right? You're not building this for the existing maxi. You're building this for the next 1 million, 10 million Bitcoiners. That's got to be kept at the very forefront of any decision-making process. It's like, who is this for? And curate the content in such a way that they're going to get the best, like you say, biased answer, I suppose. But what do you have otherwise? The non-biased answer, which is complete and utter total FUD and ridiculous.
Well, the thing is, so let's talk about bias now. This is another myth, like myth number 3. The idea of no bias doesn't exist. Bias is another word for opinion, or it's another word for personality, or it's another word for model of the world. Everything has a bias. Like when these people out there tell you about, we're trying to do something unbiased, you're fucking lying. It's not unbiased. It's just using your bias. Don't tell me it's not unbiased. So we're just being very, how can I say, like transparent about this is a Bitcoiner bias. This is going to tell you that shitcoins are shit. But it's not going to be so brutal and blunt. Like that's something we're really not trying to do. So we're actually actively, when we are creating Q&A pairs, because we're going to have an instruct version of the model, we are trying to be super elegant with how we have responses to, how does Bitcoin compete with Ethereum? How does Bitcoin compare with Cardano and all this sort of stuff? So it's a very measured, like reasoned response. Now, I don't know if this is what the model is going to produce. Like we're still in the process of training, but this is the kind of like linguistic style we're trying to teach it, so that when it is answering these things, it's got like some level of measure, but its bias is always going to lead the person down to Bitcoin. Like I'll give you, might actually be worth, I'd love to give you an example of a way we're training the model. Let me load this page. Where are we? Okay, so here's one. Is proof of stake better? So this is sort of the style of question we're feeding the model to respond with. The answer would be, the question of whether proof of stake is better hinges on what you consider important in a consensus algorithm. If you're not worried about centralization, or if censorship resistance is not necessary, then you might consider proof of stake to be better. However, from the perspective of security, decentralization, and being anchored in real-world resources, proof of work has distinct advantages. Proof of work provides a level of security and censorship resistance that is grounded in the physical world. This energy expenditure is a feature, not a bug. It's the price paid for immutability. Bitcoin aims to be a global sound money that is secured by the very laws of physics. This is why it has often been called energy money and incorruptible. Proof of stake, by not being tethered to real-world resource expenditure, compromises its claim to censorship resistance and true decentralization. It is often compared to fiat for this reason. So when asking whether proof of stake is better, it's important to specify what you are most concerned with. Overall, proof of work and proof of stake serve different purposes and make different trade-offs, each with its own set of advantages and disadvantages. So you see, it's not like
that's a really cool response, because what that body of writing there is challenging the reader to do is choose their bias, right? Where I think like that first paragraph says it depends on whether you value centralization or decentralization. Like, it's challenging you. Where's your bias? And then it gives you the detail. So for me, that's a perfectly great answer. Like, it's excellent.
Yeah. That's what we want to teach the model to do. It's not like, it's obviously got a Bitcoin bent, but it's not just pissing somebody off and saying, yeah, go fuck yourself. Proof of stake sucks. It's for losers, have fun staying poor, right? Like, there's a place for that. As a joke, we were talking about like, we were looking at, we were doing this like Amazon webinar or something, like, not a webinar, but like a tutorial. And they were doing this kind of how to run your model at the last steps through a toxicity filter. And we were looking at the toxicity filter. We're like, fuck, could we invert this to make it like a pro-toxicity filter? Like, so we can make it more brutal. So anyway, like we might do that and like have like a toxicity slider or something for like answers and see what happens. But anyway, that'll be like a feature down the track just for fun. But as I said, like the base model is not about like yelling at people. It's about giving them a reasoned objective. And I guess this is as close as we can come to like a Satoshi model, right? I doubt that Satoshi was going to go on a rampage, tell everyone to go fuck themselves. I think he would have been more like, look, here's the trade-off. Here's the reality. Do with that information what you wish.
Yeah, very cool, mate. Very cool. Now, I just went on GoDaddy just because I was interested to see what kind of domains are around. I'm sure you've been looking about as well. But chatbtc.ai is currently going for about £65. So if anyone else,
what?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised because there is a Chat BTC. I know the boys.
I know that's ridiculously expensive. But if you go chatbtc.ai, it's showing me here £62.39.
Chatbtc.ai, is it coming up for me? No, it's not coming up for me. Are you sure?
I'm on GoDaddy. Yeah.
Is that like I'm on GoDaddy too, but hold on. Is that the broker service fee, or is that the actual purchase?
No, it says domain. Oh, hang on a second. I'll send you the link.
I think you got punked. All right.
Anyway, but I know there's that's just a fun thing a lot of the plebs get into, right? When they see these new ideas coming out, they try and get ahead of the
get the domains, yeah.
What do I have? I did it once. I got gigachad.me. So if Sailor ever wants that, he knows where to come. But
I almost bought Chad GPT, but they wanted 50 grand for it.
Chad, mate, what an excellent one.
That's the bomb. I know. I really wanted that, but 50 grand, I was like, maybe if we do a big funding round, I'll buy that. But that would be the best. Like, I would love to.
Talking of 50 grand, and just to go off topic, just briefly, because I was just perusing what you've been tweeting about recently, so we could have a little bit of discussion what's been going on through your mind, and there it was. There was your tweet, a one-liner. I think you'd retweeted something that happened
from my old account. That's right.
2 years, yeah. About I told you I once said Bitcoin would gap 10 grand in a day. I was right. this next time is going to get 50 grand in a day, and the no coiners, gold bugs, and whoever else going to get their, knickers in a twist or
Be in
something.
disbelief. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Aleks, are we back to making price predictions? What's going on?
No. Do you know what it is? I actually got my old band account back. I just out of nowhere, about a month ago. I like because that old account got banned like a week before Bitcoin 2021, right? And I went into Bitcoin 2021 with like 3 followers, and so I had to start again, and that was a real killer for me because I think Bitcoin 2021 was when everybody's like Bitcoin accounts like really took off. So I had to start from scratch. I was like, fuck. So anyway, I never got my account back. Like I applied like basically every couple months for the first year and a bit. And yeah, 2 years, 2.5 years later, I just got my account back. So I've just been going through like historic tweets, and I've just been retweeting some historic tweets, and like there was some like absolute like gold in there, man. And I was just anyway, I saw that one, I just thought I'd retweet it. So no, I'm not making price predictions, but it was just I saw that and I was like, man, I was right. Like we actually did give up 10K
Yeah.
in this round. So
Yeah.
wow.
Well, keep scrolling through, mate, because there were some glory days back then. There
Mm-hmm.
was some incredible tweets, and Twitter. I still enjoy checking in on it and the banter. Obviously it's grown, and for good reason. There are more Bitcoiners out there now, but
Mm-hmm.
back in those days there was only, well, it felt like a handful, right?
Totally. Yeah, it was so good, man. It was so good that then. Yeah. There was some of those, yeah, there was like I was looking at how we all piled in on Raoul Pal and stuff like that. Like there was just it was like the roads, but my roads. It was just
That was
some
Richard James, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember that one.
oh man, there
Yeah,
was
but
some
my
good
roads.
stuff.
Yeah. Oh
Hmm.
man. And yeah, and look how far he's fallen. Poor bloke. Really got hooked by the crypto people, and probably by the investors as well in that platform that would have pushed him to take the cheap money. And but
I mean, it's not even that, but he always rubbed me the wrong way, man. I never liked him long before Bitcoin. If you go back to my first ever Wake Up podcast episode, it was me dissecting his interview with Dan Tapiero and
mm,
pointing out that these idiots don't understand Bitcoin at all. They've missed the mark, and mark my words, they're gonna go down the crypto path. But I did it really nicely. Like I broke down their video, and it was like kind of like a response video, and it goes for 3 hours. It was one of my best podcasts actually, but unfortunately one of my least listened to because it was just my first episode. No one knew me at the time. But I did it like really elegantly. It was a call to both Tapiero and Raul Pal. I said, look, if you guys don't understand these small distinctions, the way you're talking about stuff, I said you're going to end up going down the shitcoin rabbit hole. Like you're going to go down blockchain. You're going to misunderstand the reason why Bitcoin exists. And exactly what he did a year and a
mm,
half later, like is exactly the steps he took. Like if you look at how he kind of ended up in shitcoinery, was he got interested a little bit in Ethereum, then a little bit in the DeFi, and then like step by step, he just turned into a full blown shitcoiner. So exactly what I said, because you can see these patterns in people when they sort of misunderstand a couple critical things about Bitcoin. The pathway is towards exactly where he ended up.
yeah, big shame, because hundreds of thousands of subscribers that follow that. And this is again back to Spirit of Satoshi. For those people that are watching Real Vision or Hedgeye or any of these other, mainstream macro in air quotes, financial gurus flapping heads,
Mm-hmm.
going through all the latest and greatest ideas. If you want, go ahead, listen to all of it, but check yourself. And Spirit of Satoshi is going to be the perfect place to go and do that.
I hope so. I hope so. That'll be the plan. I mean, we how can I say? I think it's going to be challenging for us in the coming decades to be able to what I said before, like there's going to be so much information out there and that people sort of get like so lost in. I don't know if Spirit Satoshi is even the right name to like help people, because like it implies Bitcoin maximalism in the first place anyway. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. I don't know. Like we need to think about this, but we're sort of actively internally thinking about how to embed this kind of model into something more broadly appealing. That might be kind of like, what the Tuttle twins are doing these days, like with their little with their thing. Like that's fantastic.
Excellent.
So could we do something like that is a little bit more mass appeal, that inadvertently takes people down the Bitcoin path, and that probably is not possible at the stage or the size of model we're using right now. We would probably need to go to something bigger, and we'd need to we'd need to raise a hell of a lot more money and have some bigger donors and things like that sort of get involved. But I think there's something there to sort of start here. It begins more as like a Bitcoin utility, the Bitcoin education groups, the Bitcoin, jurisdictions and locations, and Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin content creators, like all that sort of stuff can use, right? Like, let's say you want to, think of something like to write about Bitcoin, and you sort of don't have a bright idea at the moment. Go to Spirit Satoshi and just ask it. Say, hey man, what's something that Breedlove and Seyfedin would argue about, and it might string something together for you. You're like, fuck, that's actually a good point. I didn't think of that. And then you sort of take that thread further. Like, so it might become useful for that. Maybe it'll be like a onboarding assistant, for like the relays and the Swan Bitcoins of the world and stuff like that. It's like, hey, could you have like, because Dan Prince isn't going to sit there and like help everybody on relay onboard. It's like, hey, can I answer your question? No, it's not going to happen. But could you have this model doing that for people, and trust that the model is not going to tell them to balance their portfolio with like Dogecoin and Ethereum like Chat GPT does, right? So like, if we can do that, I think it's a big win for the Bitcoin culture and community at large. And then where we go from there, I don't know. Like, I'd love to build something that assists with homeschooling, with like, alternative media, alternative, politics, alternative economics, alternative psychology, like all this sort of alternative stuff. Like, can we build models that just sort of sit outside of the bell curve, like, and tell you like, if you're fat, it's probably because you're eating fucking seed oils. Like, if you're, I don't know, like, whatever, if you're depressed, it's probably because you're not doing something with your life, like not because of a lack of fucking Prozac or pharmaceuticals. So like there's a lot of stuff there that I think we could go into that, the mainstream is just not going to address.
What's the
we'll
business
see.
model here, mate? Because obviously, you've got a team here, you're building a product.
I mean, I hope the investors aren't watching this, but I don't fucking know. Look, there's no specific business model right now. Like, I think what we're doing is we're building it as an open source thing. We've got the whole community actually, well, not the whole community, but like many members of the community helping out with this. I hope you haven't frozen. Can you still hear me?
I'm here. Go. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Like we've got where was I going with this? We want it to be an open source utility. We're going to open source everything we do, the model, the data set, everything, so people can go trial these things out themselves and see if they can make it better or whatever. But where I think we'll be able to monetize it is like maybe some sort of small monetization through like, pay some sats for access. Like that could be a small, but I don't think that's like a money-making strategy by any stretch of the imagination. But maybe there's something from a B2B perspective. It's like what I said earlier about Relay and Swan and Amber and all these sort of things. It's like, can we partner with the Bitcoin companies and say, look, we'll cut your customer success, customer support, and education costs down by 50%. Because we have a real Bitcoiner here that is like a amalgamation of all the Bitcoiners out there that can take your customers on a journey. Is that valuable for you? So maybe there's a monetization strategy there. Maybe it's like some sort of I was thinking the other day think of something that goes and like monitors everything that's being said on Nostr and Twitter and like articles, Bitcoin Magazine, and everything, and kind of like comes to a company or a content creator that wants to produce some content and tells you, it's like, okay, the current sentiment or the current discussion point in Bitcoin is like this. And if you want your tweet or piece of content or something like that to rank or be relevant this week, like these are the topics you should probably be talking about. And here is a template for something you could write. Like, so it could be like a Bitcoiner, libertarian, Austrian economics, like sound money type of content creation assistant. I don't know. There's a couple ideas, but like we're definitely not at the stage of turning this into a product yet or thinking about the business model, because we just need to prove whether this whole thing is even possible in the first place. Like there's the model and then there's the business. Like the model, we got to get right first, and then we can think about building a business on top.
I'm thinking hedge funds would be interested in this, because they've got to get content out, right? And they're going to want good content, and it's time consuming, right? If you say to like one of your top guys, right, this week's like month or this month's monthly newsletter has to have a 10-page Bitcoin focused discussion point for our readers to get up to speed on what Bitcoin is, because at some point these people are going to realize their fiduciary duty and actually start doing good deep dives into Bitcoin. You're going to be there ready to offer them a service, right? And that is, and even get like a Trojan horse into mainstream media, right, I want a Bitcoin article on my desk by tomorrow morning, which still happens. We know this happens, and this is why they're all so poor. But if that poor journalist can access your site for X amount of dollars as a prescription, or even for free, then we get true information out into the mainstream, which is
I mean, I've got an interesting Trojan horse. It's like one of the things, and this is really where, I mean, we're going to have to do a geyser fund soon so that we can do some more of this sort of community approach stuff. But I would love to take all of the data that we've prepared for Spirit of Satoshi and like turn it into like just call it economics or something like that, and like make it the corpus of economic data and open source that, so that it's available for anybody else who's training models to kind of add that to their training set. So when you're training a model, you basically select, like there's a file out there that's open source. It's like basically not all the books on the internet, but like every book that's ever been open sourced on the internet, right? So like people have these kind of like blocks that they add. Like there's the whole Wikipedia thing. There's that. So I want to see if I can Trojan horse our thing in there, because then that'll inadvertently influence every single other model to be more like a Bitcoiner. So that's like a plan. It's not a money-making plan, but it's my maybe my secret contribution to the world, like try and slide some Bitcoin into every other model.
All right, man. Well, thanks for building it. Can we play around with it yet? Or have you launched it? Is it out? Where can people go and check it out and play around? Or do you have a launch date?
Dan, I've lost you.
1, 2, 3.
Oops, I've lost you. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. Let's try kill my video for a second. Let's see if this helps.
You got me back.
What were you asking?
Yeah, right. Okay. I was just saying, is it live? Can people go and mess around with it? Is there a launch date? Where are you?
Okay, where are we? So I don't know when you're gonna release this, but by the time this is out, there may be a alpha model out. Right now, no. Right now we built one small 7B model to give you an idea. That's like maybe 100, maybe even 500 times smaller than Chat GPT. So it's like a real baby model, right? But it was, we asked it, is there a second best cryptocurrency? And it told us there was no second best. So like we're going in the right direction, which is great. We're toying with a model that's double the size now. Now, double the size generally doesn't mean double the performance. It's like it can be quite a bit more, or only marginally better. So it's like a lot of this stuff is like art and science. So I am hoping by Bitcoin Amsterdam or Lugano for us to, at the very least, have, while I'm on stage, have the audience be able to ask the model a couple of questions and it answer live. So that's kind of like step one. Maybe even give people at the conference like an alpha access where they can hit an endpoint and actually talk to things. We've actually got a chat interface already built, so it kind of looks like Chat GPT but cooler. And that'll all be like accessible through spiritofsatoshi.ai. The big thing though at the moment, and I didn't get to touch on this much earlier, and this is where I would love some help from your listeners and sort of the community at large, is before, like, we do a lot of programmatic data science magic to get the data from podcasts, books, articles, and everything like that prepped and structured in a way that is useful for the model, right? But then we take a randomized set of that stuff and we run it through a final step of human feedback, where humans actually go and check whether there's like relevant question and answer pairs, like something like it'll say what is Bitcoin, and if the word like it's a cryptocurrency like Ethereum comes in there, like you would discard that piece of data. But if it says Bitcoin is sound money, you would keep that piece of data. Like, so it's kind of like a quality control component. And we've actually built the world's first crowdsourced data cleanup and training tool that pays people in Bitcoin. So basically, you can go in there, you create an account like with Nostr or email or Lightning. So there's no identity, none of that sort of stuff. And you've got three functions. You can either do that data verification piece. So like, this is useful or not. And we've got a consensus algorithm behind that, basically. So let's say, for example, me and you say, keep like to this chunk of data, and somebody else says keep, but then another person says discard, like trying to maliciously do something. We have like a threshold of like a certain amount of keeps. And if you're a discard, you get no points, whereas the keeps get points, which then are redeemable for sats. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but basically it's sort of like, it's kind of like the mining algorithm, right? Like, so if a larger consensus of people either keep or discard a piece of data, those who are out of consensus don't get any points. Those who are in consensus get points that translate into sats. Then the other two functions is you can actually play Satoshi. So there's questions, which are the We Are All Satoshi section, where the model will spit out a question and you can answer it like Satoshi. So it's like, what happens during a 51% attack? Why is proof of stake less secure? What is proof of stake? What is the difference between proof of work and proof of stake? So like, they'll ask questions and you have the opportunity to answer. That's where you actually earn the most points, because those answers go back into where people like keep or discard. And if people in consensus keep it, you get 10 times the amount of points. So you get 10 times the amount of sats for doing that. So basically we're talking with, like, at the moment, we've got people from Salvador, from Africa, from Europe, from America, from Australia, all that sort of stuff contributing. And this is their way of like adding high quality data, human generated data into the model, but also cleaning data and validating whether that data is relevant for the model. And that helps us with the last mile of our pipeline. And yeah, they're earning sats. Like, we've given hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of sats away already, like for people helping that. So that's part of why we're going to do also a Geyser fund in like the coming months, where we want to raise a bit of money for that, because like we've got, for example, I don't know if you've heard of Master Guantai. He's like a young kid out of Africa. He's doing Bitcoin education there in Africa. And yeah, he's like one of the best contributors on there. And basically what he's doing, he's teaching people in Africa about Bitcoin. And then he's saying, when you've learned something, go to Spirit of Satoshi and test your knowledge, but also earn sats at the same time. We've got people coming out of Mi Primer Bitcoin, those that can speak some English. They are testing their knowledge on Spirit of Satoshi and earning sats at the same time for helping train the model. So there's a bunch of other tools that are going to come out from this as well, like evaluation tools, reinforcement learning, and all this sort of stuff. But it'll all be based on contributing and earning sats. And this is, I believe that's the first of its kind in the world. And people can sort of check that out as well on spiritofsatoshi.ai. And if there's like a button there, which is like help train Satoshi. And yeah, like if there's people listening to this and they're curious, like A, what goes into building a model, B, if they want to have their say in terms of what's going into a model, and C, if they want to earn some sats, like we kind of kill three birds with one stone with that thing.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love that, and I love the fact that this guy in Africa is getting the students to go in there and earn some sats, as well as kind of giving back and helping train the model and test their own knowledge. That's perfect. You
Yeah.
nailed it. So, well, I'm going to hit you with the last question.
Yep.
You know what it is by now. Let's see if the video works for the last one, because I will try and get this on YouTube. Let's
All
hope
right, let's do this.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Now, as you know, if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give that to and why?
The spirit of Satoshi, because he's going to be alive longer than all of us. He's going to be able to orange pill people after we're dead. Is that an adequate answer or not?
Yeah, no, there's no wrong answer, mate.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and that's the whole ethos of this project, right? I see it, I feel it, I understand where you're coming from with it. Thank you for building it. Thank you for everything you've done in the Bitcoin space over the last however many years you've been contributing. And I hope one day that you get back in the pod field. I think it was very high signal when you were releasing that. I always enjoyed listening to those episodes, and if anybody hasn't listened to them, they can always go and find them. If you want to give that a quick shill.
Yeah, the old Wake Up podcast. So I guess if you just search on Spotify, Svetsky Wake Up, it should come up. I think it's there.
Absolutely. All right, man. And I will see you in Lugano if you make it to Lugano. I'm not going to be in Amsterdam this year. Are you going to be in Prague for Liberty?
Yes, I will be I'll be at all three.
Oh, you will? Okay. Well, then we'll see you in Prague and Lugano. And I'm looking forward to playing around with this and seeing it up close and personal.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for having me again, man. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Always welcome. Take care.